I'm Radha Mistry, and you're listening to Future Feelings in collaboration with Dean Audio. The study, the science, and the art of understanding the unknown and preparing for the future has long been a preoccupation of humankind and is of particular concern to designers, especially as the stakes of our global present feel so high. As a designer with a background that spans architecture, narrative environments, and strategic foresight, I'm here to help you unpack the purpose and practice of futuring through 5 interviews with practitioners who approach this work in myriad ways. Now, let's jump right in.
My name's Julian Bleeker. I am currently in Venice Beach, California. So I think like 5 miles and anywhere between 20 minutes and 2 hours from where you are.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I'm in my backyard studio. I have a studio behind my house, which is like a little bit like a sanctuary for doing the work that I do, which generally ranges around trying to find the way to activate for myself and then for very many other people ways of thinking and seeing into possibility and possible worlds, which sounds like a really big thing, but I think it's something that we all do at one level or another. We've all done, like when we were 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, we really tapped into this thing that we called imagination. And at some point, we lose our grip on that. We lose our handle on it for any number of possible reasons. And I'm trying to find the way to get back to that. Like, I feel like this is my mission now is to learn how to imagine new possibilities, new ways of understanding and seeing into the world, and then actually making those worlds.
And I guess, what have you learned so far? Because one of the pieces of context that I'll maybe add to this is a few months ago, was it a few months ago? You somehow magically gathered about 20 of us in this beautiful house, this Frank Lloyd Wright designed house outside of Detroit. And you had us come together to really think about how we imagine harder. And I'd love if you could expand a bit on, one, what you mean by that and why you kind of pulled us all together and, you know, where that has led you to this point so far.
Yeah, that was an act of real unbridled kind of passion and a moment of like enthusiasm and a sense of like such a clear sense of, I guess, my own kind of professional purpose. Maybe it's also personal, but it felt like professional purpose in a way. Whereas like I sensed very strongly that there was a desire amongst a beautiful network of mostly confused creative folks, confused in the best of senses, that were trying to find their way into bringing their own ideas and abilities and the situations that they found themselves in professionally, you know, whatever context they were in. By context, I mean like they're doing something at they have a job, or they're a professor someplace, or they do have a job, but they also do these other things like around creative practice. And it seemed like there was this network of people who I was very much familiar with, who it felt like it just needed, you know, if we could get together, I feel like it really felt genuinely, it was like so clear. If we get together and we really put our time and energy and effort into this thing, we can ignite a creative renaissance. I mean, it just felt so clear to me. Like this is all I need to do is provide a situation and a context and a moment for kind of, you know, connecting people, because there's some people who, like, I guess, didn't know each other, and then there's some people who knew of each other, but hadn't really had a context to kind of meet and interact. And that was the primary motivation. And I called it the Imagine Harder Summit, because that was the kind of thing that felt like, for this group of people, everyone who I invited came. There were some people who like almost couldn't come, you know, for like reasons. They weren't like, I don't get what you're doing. They were like, oh, my kid just got sick.
Mm-hmm. We're trying to make it work. Yeah.
I didn't even, I tried to use like an experiment. It's like, I didn't even like apologize to them and be like, oh man, I'm sorry. I'd be like, well, that's why we have partners. Let them take care of the kid. Like I was really being like relentless. I really wanted people to come. And of course, behind the scenes, like, most of me is just kind of like, oh man, I'm sorry about that. But
we know you have a good heart, Julian.
yeah. So I was like, let me rely on the fact that people assume that I have a good heart, which I think I do. And so I just felt like it was such a clear vision. Like if I could do this and get these people together in this room, and a lot of that came from in the months before I'd given a couple of kind of keynote talks, as you will at certain times, and I was kind of trying this translation of this kind of feeling I had into a like a 20-minute bit, where you just kind of present to people. And I was let me just try this idea, this thought I have. It's like with the main beats of it being and the kind of coda being like, it's time to imagine harder. Like, there's a talk, blah, 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 and this is why I'm telling you this, because it's time to imagine harder. And I remember doing it and kind of, like engaging the audience just by eyesight, just kind of like looking around at people. And from older, senior professional people to, people who were just, getting their BFA. Mm-hmm. I just saw this kind of like this look of just like, yeah, like I feel this. I hear what you're saying. And the kind of, generous response that you might get afterwards. There was one event, it was a very high production value event. I was like, man, I better get this right. I was genuinely nervous. Not that I don't get nervous, but it's just kind of like, they also didn't have a little teleprompter, so you knew which slide was coming next.
Yeah.
So it's like, I had to memorize the whole, like 20-minute thing.
Right.
Yeah. And there were some words I wanted to use, and I was like, I was literally saying them over and over and over again. Don't forget that word. Don't forget that word. And then afterwards, I just got this from people who I revered, who didn't know me from anyone, to like, who's this guy, who I revered, coming up to me like backstage and just being like, oh my God, that was incredible. That was really powerful. Wait, so who are you? Where are you from? And this kind of stuff. It was just like that kind of generous kind of recognition that made me feel like, okay, I think I'm onto something. And I think I would not be putting myself in service of this community that I love if I just kind of sat on it or sat on my laurels and been like, yeah, I just gave a great talk. I'm gonna go fuck off. It was like, I gave this great talk because it resonated with people. It spoke to them. And I wanted to bring that. And I wanted to do it in such a way where it's like, okay, a little bit awkward being like a thought leader, but if I can bring a network of people together who I also revere and I also look up to and try to, sort of, help them help us all message this, because I knew people felt it. Yeah, I get what you're saying. They might be like, oh, I kind of say it like this. Maybe we had a whole conversation about how do we actually message this? What is the the meme? And I also wanted to like really lean into the power of the kinds of things that we can be, because we think a lot, that we can very easily dismiss as extractive. It's like, I don't know about this social media thing. It seems to be making people, buy stuff that they don't need. It's like, I get it, but also it works. So how can we kind of band together in a way and just say like, you know what? Let's do some really collective world building, because it almost feels like if we could get, if we get Near Future Laboratory and Superflux and Radha and Elliot and Tony and Fiona, blah blah blah, everyone else is kind of like, man, I love these people. I wish I could do what they do. How do they do it? And we just said, we're together on this. There's something that's bigger than any one of us individually. This is not a zero-sum game. This is a game where we need to bring creativity and the imagination back into the conversation about how we remake and build the kinds of worlds that we want to inhabit. Mm-hmm. That seems so clear to me. It's like, if we could just find the way to go in lockstep. You see, even talking about it, thinking about it, gives me chills. I'm just like, yeah, let's see that.
No, that's palpable. And I think one of the things I do want to take a moment to kind of talk a little bit about is when you talk about, well, there's a bazillion questions that have come up now. But when you talk about world building for folks who might not be as familiar with it, how do you conceptualize like what even world building is? And why is that something that, as folks who operate in the futures space, why is that, I don't want to call it a tool because, I hate tools, but why is that an approach to thinking that we rely on so often?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I'm a little bit allergic to the word world building. And it's not really worth getting into, except to say that what it makes me feel is it's almost like grounded imagining. It's like grounded. It's like, okay, so we all imagine, whether we believe it or not, we all see possibility, at almost like every waking moment into, how we make a decision. It's like when you think about having a cup of coffee, if you think visually, you see I saw my diner mug, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's when I thought about coffee. That's what I thought about. And in a way, you're sort of constructing, a path forward into, if we want, into a very, very near future. In a few moments, this is what's going to happen. At the same time, I'm imagining what it's going to be like as I'm waiting for the coffee, what it's going to be like. Okay, I'm going to see Radha. So I picture you in my head. And in my mind, world building is a kind of grounded, maybe there's certain people would assign rules to how you do world building. And, maybe I'm into that, maybe I'm not. I think it can be helpful in some contexts, especially for whom, grounded imagining as a phrase might be like, well, I don't know. Can you tell me how to do that? And you might be like, yeah, we help us, like, let's do some steps. Let's start, in a particular procedure. And some people, the world building oftentimes goes top down. So it's like, it'll be planetary scale. And you kind of get down to like, what is the nature of the planet? What is the nature of the geography? How is it formed? And you kind of very gradually get to cultures and communities. And then you might get down to like individuals, but maybe not. And so that's one way of grounding a big idea. Wow, I wish we lived in a world where we could have addressed the climate crisis. It's a good one. Okay, let's imagine into that world. What does that look like? And you might start from the top down and say like, well, we need to work on, let's start at the upper atmosphere and then work our way down. How do we get this cleaner? Okay, then you start getting closer down to like, real grounded, really thorny, intractable problems. Like, okay, how are we going to address, the hydrocarbon problem? And so you really get into the imagining into that world, but now you're grounding it, because now you're beginning to address real systemic components, different kinds of structures and institutions and networks of power and flows of value and all that kind of stuff. And then you're really into it, and it can be very exhausting. And then the other way is of building a world, of imagining a world in a grounded way, is to start from just the question is like, where does my coffee come from in this world? You start from that. You start from the diner mug. Where did this mug come from, and how was it made? What's on it? Does it have a logo? If it has a logo, is it of some kind of commercial entity of some description? If so, what is that? Is it and so you can start building the world through these disconnected components, like the archaeologist who comes back to our world and is only able to see the material cultural artifacts left behind by people, or maybe because they use a quantum phase time traveling device. They can't see people; they can only see objects, and so they grab an object and they use it as a clue, as a way to try to unpack. They're almost like Columbo, trying to figure out like who were these people. I found a diner mug that had a logo for something that seems like it might be an energy company. I wonder what kind of energy they consumed. And I found this baseball hat, but it wasn't named for a sports team. It was a name for, a cafe. And you start finding the components, and that that's another way of kind of imagining into a world. And you kind of imagining as you kind of go forward. You're asking yourself questions: what do I see if I ended up in someone's kitchen, or if I ended up in a corner store? Yeah. And how do those tell me about this particular world?
Yeah. And to be completely honest, I sometimes feel like that the way in where we start almost, with our feet on the ground at the individual scale tends to be more compelling and can oftentimes lead to points of inquiry that feel a lot richer. But there's something liberating about being able to explore futures at that scale. And I'm remembering when you came to guest lecture in my history and theory course at SciArc with my architecture students, my MArch students. And I could see, I don't know if you sensed this or if you saw it, but they had every single student had an aha moment when you came in. And it's because so much of the ways in which they think about, I always say buildings are future artifacts, right? When you're thinking about what an architectural artifact is, you have to imagine what the world looks like and how that world evolves around this thing you're placing in the ground that hopefully evolves as society evolves and hopefully addresses the needs and expectations of the people, the plants, the other entities, the beings that will inhabit that space. But that scale can be really overwhelming at times. And one of the things that I have found so refreshing about your practice and the way you go about futuring is the, kind of really approaching things from the mundane future, the mundane rituals, this approach to making about the future in the way that feels very tangible. And I'd love for you to, if you could just talk a little bit more about that and share a little bit more about, the concept of design fiction. And my favorite story in that, when you came to visit us, was when one of the students asked, "What's your metric for success with this work?" And I don't know if you remember what your response was.
I don't. I want to hear it. I want to remember it.
Yeah, it was so wonderful because I was like, that's I aspire to be like that. But you said, you know what? If I just put a smile on someone's face, that's enough. In true Julian fashion, right? But that's so beautiful because it releases us from the burden of feeling like we have to solve a problem and end up somewhere productive, when half the time, just engaging in the inquiry and saying, I want to see where the process leads me, is productive. It is generative. Allowing ourselves to play, allowing some whimsy like that. There's so much value in that. And that's not something that I think we give ourselves permission to do. And one of the things I've learned from your practice is giving myself permission as someone who is, I'm always reluctant to call myself a futurist, but as someone who is a designer in the futurist space, to just make shit because I'm curious about the future.
Yeah. And I think that's the, you kind of come around to this, owning a recognition in oneself. This is, coming around to the point where I felt that in the whatever my practice is, I always felt like well, it better be serious because you want to work with serious people and they expect you to be serious. You know what I mean? Talking to a Fortune 50 client, you're not talking to the CEO, but you're talking to someone from there. It's oh man, they're going to pay for this. It better feel like something that they would get from McKinsey. And now I'm just kind of fuck that. What if they want? They know they're talking to me, and what can I bring that is of unique value? What is the other thing? And so, I guess going back to it's just going to sound crazy, but it's just going back to my 8-year-old self in a way. What is it that made me excited? And I felt like for my entire life, I've been chasing the feeling of being, 8-year-old, whatever, 8, 10, 13, whatever it was when I was at a point where it's no one told you not to be playful and have fun and make people laugh. No one told you that it makes no sense for you, and your brother and sister to put on a little puppet show, sitting behind the sofa, and charging your parents and their friends who have been over for a cocktail party or whatever a nickel each. Like, no one told you. That's the stupidest thing ever. Why would you all want to do that? It's expected of us, when we're young, and you might look at it and admire it. It's like, oh wow, look at that! Look at they're putting on a little show, and they're totally improvising it. Maybe they rehearsed a little bit, but basically they're just making stuff up. I can tell that. And as an adult, you look at it and you're looking at it, and you might be, they're not, maybe we're not doing anything profound as a narrative arc or something, but we're playing, and they recognize and they appreciate the value of it because they gave you a nickel, and they're paying attention, and they might even laugh, and they might laugh at it might just be a feeling that they have of like, wow, isn't it amazing what a youthful collective of imagination can do and put on, and not even second guess themselves, not even be like, I don't think we should do this, just be like, no, let's put on a show, this will be great. Or do the same thing, getting the neighborhood kids together and grabbing my dad's old Super 8 movie camera, being like, we're going to make a movie, and they're being like, great, what's it about? I don't know. You stand there and pretend that you're kung fu fighting. We'll figure it out in the edit, and just doing it. And that was meaningful. That was profound in a way, because you were essentially doing this world building. And at some point, not for me, but at some point we're told to stop doing that. It could be anything, bad parenting, or just like an admonishing, kind of dysregulated teacher at school who's got their own problems they need to work through. Or we're just told, it's like, look, it's time to get serious. That putting on the puppet show was fine, but now look, let me tell you, life's hard. You're going to need to find something to do, where you can, get a job. Maybe you can, look at your uncle. He's done a great job as an accountant. Do you ever think about accounting? That kind of thing. You're kind of like, well, I guess it seems okay. Or if you're telling me, then I guess that better be the way it is. And then some of us, that doesn't happen, both to our, and for beautiful reasons and circumstances, but also for challenging things, because we just don't find ourselves fitting into, the quote unquote accountant. I don't want to diminish the accounting as a thing, but, where it's like, okay, this is the path, this is where you go. And basically, you do this, and then maybe, if you're lucky, maybe by 65, you'll be able to retire. But it doesn't seem like it nowadays. It just seems like you're going to be grinding, and that can be hard. There are a lot of people with a very high, high creative consciousness struggle immensely to find their way and to fit into the world, and to find a way of collaborating and integrating with structure, which is the thing that says, look, bank account, driver's license, tax ID, you got to file taxes, all this kind of stuff. That can be such a challenge for someone who's highly creative, just can't deal with structure. And you find a lot of them just they don't make it. They just find themselves on the street. They find themselves in conflict. Yeah.
Say I am like the worst corporate citizen who has found myself in corporate foresight for the last 15 years somehow.
Yeah.
And I think like my role is usually the one to come in and say, how do I break this thing? That looks like fun.
So this is I think an important point to this, because people like you, and then our friend Elliot, and scores of others who navigate that kind of rocky chasm between creativity, imagination, and structure, where they're just kind of like, all right, I'll teach for a little bit. I did that too. Then maybe that's the place, because creativity and openness, and you share what you want, and then you find like, oh man, actually maybe not. There are a lot of challenges here. So you kind of step back and forth in a way. So I'll teach for a bit, or you manage to set up an arrangement and configuration, which like you have, which is amazing. Like you were able to like regulate all those tensions you feel, the pull to be a creative, imaginative spirit, and you've got art on your wall, so you feel a sensitivity to it. And then, but you can go into the office and deal with the managing partner. And holding all that together at once, that is a high stress situation. But if you can regulate well enough, then you can manage that. And so how do we find the way to make to make the situation that that's just your end. Sorry to point out, but yeah, I think you get the tension,
Yeah.
it, and people probably listening will feel it. I get what you're talking about. Totally get it. How can we make that so that situation is a place that you can be, that isn't, wow, man, how did you do that? You and I probably both get, and everyone else gets asked, like, how do you do it? I was at a workshop at ASU, with Ed Finn and the gang, and I got a lot of really earnest, questions at the dinner, after the glass of wine. People were like, man, how do you do what you do? How do you get paid to do what you do? I was like, it ain't easy. Let me tell you what. Don't make any assumptions that it's like I got it all figured out, but I know what's right, and I know what feels good to myself, and I know what brings value to people. And if that value means I can make a person smile because of some work I did, then that's beautiful. Then it's like I've done my work. That's cool.
I love these 2 points that you kind of pulled forward, which is, you and your brother making little home videos. I think you'd shared one on social like last week or something. Someone was throwing a pie in someone's face. I don't know how the story ended, but it seemed really interesting. And then this kind of like crusade you're on right now to have us all, just to like reawaken our sense of imagination and our sense of play. And the question I get asked a lot, and I'm sure you get asked a lot, is like, what did your path look like? How did you get from the little boy, who was super into like imaginary worlds and making stories to, a very wise man who is still very curious and playful, sitting in Venice, like just trying to get us to wake up and be like, how do we keep playing? How do we stay curious and inquisitive? What like connect us between those 2 points if you can.
Yeah.
And it can be meandering and it can be nonsensical, because that's been my path too. But
yeah. Well, if I had to look back, and there's one way to say it, it's like I kind of knew what I was doing, which I definitely did. There's a lot of internal doubt and conflict all throughout the whole path. But also, I think there were probably like 2 main things. One was a component of myself that is just a strong intuition, but it wasn't the kind of intuition where I knew what was going on. It was an intuition where it was almost like it will work out. And it wasn't like totally clear. It wasn't like, like full of like, I know what I'm doing at all. As a matter of fact, it was the opposite. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I wasn't able to question myself to the point of making, of like over determining where I was going, because I didn't know most of the time. But I had just like a strong sense. And then there were just like these moments where I don't know if it was the nature of my character or personality or just something that I kind of effervesced, that I just had these beautiful, mentor might be overstating it, but just people who just kind of like nudged me just ever so delicately in a direction. One was, this was a big nudge. It was my dad, who would take my brother and I to jazz. Grew up in New Jersey. Take us to jazz clubs in New York, like totally not legal kind of thing. So I'm going to take my 12 and 13-year-old sons to the Village Vanguard. It's just like at like 11
Great
o'clock
parenting.
at night on a school night. You know what I mean?
Great parenting.
And I remember so clearly one time, I think it was McCoy Tyner was playing, and he said, in a set break, my dad was like, go talk to them. My brother and I were super into, I mean, still am, but I kind of gave up performing. My brother kept doing it. And he's like, go talk to them. And it's like, no, what are you talking about? It's crazy. Like, this is no. And he said, and it's like, well, if we did, what would we say? He said, just tell them that you enjoyed it. You enjoyed the set. I was like, nah, No, go ahead and do it. You'll see. It's gonna be amazing. Oh, okay, go up there. I don't know. I might have brought a napkin. Could you give me an autograph, something like that? I remember going up to McCoy Tyner, like legend, and being like, "Hey, man, I enjoyed the set." And I just remember it was like, not for a moment, he wasn't sure where to look. And he looked down. He's like, "Oh, hey, little man, I appreciate that. Thank you. Tell me your name." And I just had nice conversation with him. And said, like, I love playing jazz and playing in a little band and high school, that whole thing. And it was just such a warmth, as he's like dabbing the sweat off him. But you could say he looked at me, and he recognized, whatever it was, like he saw like an earnestness maybe, and a desire, and he had enough. I don't know the man at all, but it seemed like he had enough of a spirit in him, just like, I'm not going to dismiss this guy because I want to go to the bar and get another Harvey Wallbanger or whatever he's drinking. He's like, wow. Shoot his sleeve and look at his watch. He's like, you're out late, kind of thing.
How'd you end up here?
Yeah, there's something about that. So I think that kind of, that it was like an early seared in my mind of thing of like, there's just the power of connecting to someone. And I kept that with me because I would do, further on in life when I was, in college and then grad school, you find someone to aspire to indirectly. It's like, wow, I really like their scholarship. I like the way they write, I like the way they think. I like the way they, everything about them. It's like, and then they're modeling for you in a way, a kind of behavior. It's like, okay, and then I would do the same thing. So every time I went to a, academic talk or to a lecture at some, at the Dia Center or wherever it was, I was like, it was a rule. You have to get over yourself and go up to the mic and ask a question. So form a question and do whatever you need to do to get to that person. Just go up to say, just like, hey, I'm Julian Bleeker. I'm studying here and really enjoyed your talk. Really enjoyed that last book you did, whatever it was. And just do those kind of connecting things. And I think it was like, that gave me a sense of, like a groundedness in whatever practice I was in. You start feeling like maybe you're part of a network that's bigger than you. And that is encouraging. And then I also found that it was easier to, get that kind of mentoring and guidance from the people who were supposed to be mentoring, guiding me. So like, faculty and that kind of stuff. And I had people just sort of say like, I think they saw something and they were like, go talk to her. She's the one that you need to really connect with. And I remember I did that at a lecture that I was just auditing this cyberpunk science fiction class when I was at the University of Washington. And she said, Julian, you should come to this lecture. Donna Hare was giving a lecture. You should go to this lecture. And I went to the lecture and I did my thing. It's like, it was packed lecture hall. And I was like, I'm going to sit here. I'm going to wait until I can go up to her and just say like, hey, Professor Hare, we really enjoy your work. And I did that. And she did the McCoy Tyner thing. She's like, tell me about what you're studying. Who are you and what are you doing? And, in a maybe 7-minute conversation, she's like, I'd like to hear more. Like, send me an email. Here's my email address. And I did that. And then she said, you should apply. And then I applied. And then I got into this remarkable program where there was, then the network of these people who can help guide you expand. So I think, if I were to summarize, it's like openness, find that way to, I think I was able to find that way to not question my own sincerity to the point where I wouldn't go up and talk to people, engage people. It's different from networking. It wasn't like extractive networking. It was more like a genuine sense of, leading with like, I admire who you are and what you're doing. And I think that's really hard for creatives to do because it creates, well, I think, this might be a little bit of cynicism, but it's like, I feel like when you're a creative, you look at the world as a zero-sum game. Is that the right term? Zero-sum game. There's only so much value to be given to creative people. There's a small piece of cheese that we're all chasing after. Whether it's a grant, recognition, it's like, oh, I want to get into Fast Company's 30 under 30. I better, and there are only 30 spots for that. So I better be better than this other person, and I cannot celebrate this other person who's alongside of me, even though I admire the hell out of their work. I cannot reach out to them. And I think it's even hard it's maybe even harder for creatives to accept that kind of adulation, particularly from a peer. They'll accept it from Fast Company that wants to celebrate them. They'll accept it from, whatever award they might be given or recognition.
Words or whatever it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think it's hard to do otherwise. It's hard to be generous. I think as a generalization, it's hard for us to be generous amongst each other. Is kind of where my head's at. I'm not saying that's a truism. It's sometimes just it's the way I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I learned from those moments with, McCoy Tyner, Donna Haraway, and countless other times it's happened, even with Tony and Fiona, who I'm just like, oh my God, Tony and Fiona.
I know.
When the first time I met them, it might have been here. I think what I had to do is I invited Tony to come do a little brown bag thing when I was at Nokia. I think that was my way to kind of connect with them in some way, I think. And it's silly because they're such generous people.
So generous. They're so open and just willing to kind of share what they're working on. And I think one of the things that I've just admired with people like, Tony and Fiona and even yourself is that because you are all quite perpetually curious, there isn't this sense of like, I've arrived, let me be your guide and like the wise one. It's like, oh no, I want to learn from you. Like, what are you doing, Radha? And I always think like, me, what am I doing? You touched a little bit on Nokia. And I think one of the questions again, that I get so much is like, what does this look like in real life? It's great to be able to talk about the future, and it's great to be able to do these experiments and to build stories and make worlds. But, what does it look like out in the real world? And I don't know if your experience at Nokia was part of that trajectory or, like a little wandering kind of sidestep. I don't know. But I'd love to hear more about that and just your experience out there.
Yeah. I think everything was definitely a wandering thing. I envied. So this kind of connects the story. So I envy people who have, to a certain level, who have a career plan. They have a spreadsheet.
What does that look like?
Yeah. What does it look like? And I guess I envy them because I'm unable to do it. Just that kind of, it's like, I guess, jealousy in a way. It's like, how can you see your life that way? And I'm not saying that in the way where it's like, I don't want an answer. Basically what I'm saying, it's like your idea of life is stupid. I'm saying, like, I'm literally asking the question earnestly, like, how do you see your life that way? And so a dear friend, no longer with us, sadly, was one of those people who had a plan. It was almost like you say, like, man, he's going to be in charge of something someday. Look at that. And full of charisma. Everyone around him who worked with him or alongside of him, loved him. It was just like, oh my God, he's amazing. Oh, oh wow, I know him too. And he's just one of those people, Canadian, when I was teaching, when I moved to Los Angeles in 2005 to teach in the film school at USC. And so that's what I was doing. And part of that, I was teaching MFA students who were studying interactive media, and the overall broad kind of remit of that particular division of the film school was if there's going to be a future of visual storytelling, it's going to involve some kind of interactive component. Okay, get it. Cool. It makes sense. And so a lot of it was kind of like games. And at the time when video games, and I was mostly interested in interactive media, sort of interaction broadly conceived. And so I was doing a lot of like the early days pre-iPhone what are the ways in which we can use mobile technology as a form of interactive, play. So there was location-based media was a big thing, because you could maybe find a phone that had GPS in it, like a Nokia phone that had GPS, and you could maybe you could connect a GPS device to a phone. Like, how does that work? And so we're just kind of playing around, experimenting. What is it? What could interactive media be in a if you were to situate that in an expansive way within the world? I guess what Apple's now calling spatial computing. It's like, it's going to compute in space. What does that look like? And so a lot of experiments, and I was really into mobile technology. And so I had these kind of indirect connections to Nokia, and this guy, his name was Mike Krasinski, was at Nokia. He was a designer, product designer. And he was just another one of those people who's just really into seeing what's going on in the world and making connections with people. And he's such a beautiful way to him that he would come by, come by USC. I think at the time we were doing this maybe once a month. We were doing a mobile Monday, let's just get people together, get a few $100s from the university's $1 billion endowment. And let's get some canapes and a like a tub of suds, and just have people around, just talk about what they're doing and try to network commercially, with other organizations and activities and all that kind of stuff. And so he would come to those things, and we got to know each other. And at one point he's like, "Hey, could you come over and give a talk at Nokia? Just tell us about the work that you're doing." And I remember giving like a kind of crappy talk, because I didn't know exactly what I was doing. And I was also thinking like, wow, I wonder what's going on in Nokia. Why are they interested in this modality of mobile technology beyond just the instrumental kind of, on the far side of the structure matrix? Like, they're just a machine. They're making, I forget what the number was. There was some number crazy. It's like, like a new phone every 12 seconds, or maybe it was like every 12 seconds, every second they're making 12 phones. It was something along those lines. Just incredible cadence of just producing material artifacts that go out and live in the world. And they had so much, more money than sense. I don't know if that's true, but they had a lot of money. So they were just trying to, what can we do to, prove our worth and value in these other kind of adjacent worlds, and maybe interesting ideas will come out of these kind of collaborations with universities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to do research and that kind of thing. And through that, I just the wandering thing is like, I had a meeting with the head of my department at the time, and nice enough guy. I like his kids, but we weren't getting along.
Yeah.
It was just like, because I was, like you just sort of described, I'm a really, really crap employee. I'm like, do not tell me what to do. This is not going to work out well. And even if you tell me what to do, it's going to work out worse for you, because I'm still not going to do it. And it's not because I want to be a pain in the butt. It's because it's like, I think that there are other ways to see into the world, and the kinds of worlds that you're seeing are not, I just don't dream those worlds. And I think that, with a little bit of conceit, it's like, I think my dream is more powerful than yours. And so I need to go after it. I can't sort of sit here and kind of like pretend that that you've got it all figured out, because from where I'm sitting, I don't think you do. I think that there's a more expansive, near future and you're just looking at this little minuscule component of it. And I think my approach and my practice is just like, I can't help but do this. And if that means that you're only going to extend my contract another year, so be it. That's cool. I'm gonna find the way to not in a selfish way, but I'm gonna find the way to advantage the dream that I see on those terms. And I think it's going to work out. And so I remember coming home and being like, well, USC is not going to work out. And I remember my wife being just like, well, I guess you better figure something else out. And then she just kind of walked off. Kind of like, oh, okay, cool. No hugs, no pat on the back. No, you're right. You're right. That's what I need to do. And I called up Mike. I said, Mike, here's the situation. And he's like, you know what? Why don't you let's do a little bit of work together. Let's do a contract kind of deal. for a summer, right? Because I found out at the end of the school year, let's hang out here for the summer and let's see what happens. And so I went there. It was they were over in Calabasas at the time. I went over there and spent a summer, and I liked what I saw. I liked the people. They were like really incredibly talented designers and creatives and master model makers, and they had all these facilities, and they seem to have the other thing that is important for people with big dreams, which is like money. So let's put something together. Let's make something work. I think I can, be a part of helping this huge organization see into possible futures that it isn't able to see into otherwise. And did that for like about 7 or 8 years. But that was completely wandering. That was like literally being forced. I love when I get laid off jobs and that kind of stuff, because it's like, to me, it's exciting. It's like, wow, something next is going to happen. And I guess a level of confidence to be like, on the money side, it's like, well, I always seem to be able to turn a buck. I mean, in worst case, I put on a little puppet show, which is fine. And best case is you're going to be living in your dream, the thing that you see. But you have to be prepared for someone to be like, to have that moment of doubt and kind of conflict. And if you do that enough, you start to realize, like, no, you know what? I'm on a path. I didn't always realize, now, it feels like I've been around enough. Just like, I'm on a path. This is good. Nothing's going to stop me. It's going to keep going and growing. And that's a kind of, I guess, it's not hubris. It's like I'm humbled by the fact that I recognize that, but it's a earnest commitment. It's like, why would I not do this? Why would I ignore the lesson that my dad gave me when he took us to the Village Vanguard? Why would I just put all that, be like, that's just a story? It's like, no, that was a lesson. That was a lesson.
But convince people that this work is important. Like, and this is not the metrics question. Because the metrics thing, like, I hate that question. But because you and I think, both believe there's value to this, right? And I can, like, the mission you're on, it's like you're so passionate about it and you believe in it so deeply, and that's so palpable. And I feel the same. I'm like, yeah, like, even at Autodesk, I was the person, I said foresight so many times, my team got me a little bell, and every time I said foresight, they would ring it. Because I was like, foresight can solve the world. And like, of course it can't solve everything, but I think that way of thinking and that way of approaching the world and expanding your sense of like what could be is so useful and so pertinent all the time, and especially right now. How do you convince people to give a shit about it?
Yeah. So there's the people who don't need to be convinced. So those are like the people who kind of like look up, or smile, look up, and just be like, whoa, wait, what's this guy talking about? This seems like a thing. So the convincing thing, it's like, is coming to the conversation with an unwavering sense of commitment, enthusiasm, and reminding people, it's like, finding the way not to antagonize people, which I think was a mode that I managed to kind of like slough off from my academic days, which is like, you got to be a critic. There's something wrong with everything. Your job is to interrogate what's wrong and to build on that, or something like that. Whatever that is. So forget that. That doesn't work on anyone, because as soon as you antagonize someone, as soon as you tell someone, it's like, the way you've been thinking about the world and the future is wrong, then they're just like, fuck you. Why should I listen? What are you saying? If you bring something else to it, almost like at a I'm not a religious guy, but almost at an evangelical kind of sense of purpose and direction, they'll feel it. And I think if you do that, and you do that enough, then that's the convincing part. Now, if it's at the point of the other kind of convincing, where it's like, now I'm talking to structure, so I'm talking to the CEO of a company, and they're like, they might be like, I'm not sure what the value of this is for me, given where I'm at. They might be like, I get what you're doing. It's beautiful. I read the book. I totally get it. I'm with you, but now I'm just trying to justify it to my my financial planning committee. I got to go in there. That's a different kind of conversation. And I think that you have to be prepared, just like any other circumstance, in a commercial circumstance. Someone's going to be like, I love you guys. You guys are great. I just don't have the money for it. And that's going to happen no matter what you're doing. Mm-hmm. I think the interesting part is to, at this particular point that we're at now in the business cycle or something, I think I see it as a trough where creativity and imagination and structure are not in deep harmony. And I think maybe this is coordinated partly by just like the layoffs that have been going on for the last couple of years. It's like, oh, time to cut back. We thought we needed all these creatives, but we don't. And it's interesting. Like I don't track it enough to know who is getting laid off. In some circumstances, I'm sure I'm not sure. It might be like across the board, but also I see like we've got this LA design community Slack. It's pretty robust kind of community. I don't know, probably several, maybe even 10,000 people in it or whatever. And I saw a note on this morning where someone said, hey, something like, sorry for everyone at Stripe who got laid off today, 10% cuts, and had a link to a post with Jack Dorsey and his beard. But it feels like it's a lot of creative. I could be totally wrong, but it feels like, okay, that's excess. We don't need that. Or you hear things, it's the kind of layoffs where they'll bring in McKinsey to justify the hammer coming down, and McKinsey will take care of telling them like, where should you be spending money? What's bringing value to your organization? If they're not bringing value to your ad sales, Google, which is now an ad company, or the project that you're working on does not have a direct connection to the profit centers, then you go. And a lot of times that's creative, because what creative does is it brings new ideas. And those ideas at the outset are kind of like, I have no idea how to make money on this, but it seems cool. It starts out at that cool feeling. This is cool. Let's just put it up and see what happens. And maybe it's over time, we'll figure out where, what the monetization strategy is. And things kind of slide from imagination to structure. And at some point, structure is like, we got it from here. We're good. Thank you for this bright, beautiful, creative little gizmo or widget. But we got it now. We don't need you anymore. And as much as they might want to keep creativity in the house, oftentimes they don't. Like matter of fact, friend of mine, Dennis Crowley, I'll never forget this. His company, Dodgeball, got bought by Google. I can say this. Everyone knows it. Got bought by Google. And I remember I was like, man, that's amazing, Dennis. And I remember going to visit him at Google, their headquarters there in New York. And he was like, I was like, man, I was like, man, what are we going to do? This you got this great, mothership. And I remember visiting him, and he was like in this kind of behind this glass, kind of in this glass office. And it was a little bit sad, because it was like, he was like, oh, they're the monkeys. And he said, hey, good to see you. And I was like, I was ready to kind of like, let's talk. What are we going to do? Because now structure recognizes creativity, because they got you here. You're the most imaginative person I know. Like, so what are we going to do next? He's like, okay, this is how it's going to work. I'm like, getting out of business. Like, do we need a whiteboard? Should we get? And he said, this is how it's going to work. First, we're going to go to the sushi bar, but don't fill up, because then we're going to go to the burger bar. And so in his mind, he was just like, I mean, he was like, he confided, he's like, I'm just sitting here waiting to basically time out, because they're doing whatever they can to crush my dreams. And when he finally timed out, whatever that timeout is, his rest and vest or whatever, was party. Remember going to the party? It was amazing. Got a t-shirt. A t-shirt just said in little letters, "Google is the crusher of dreams."
No.
Google is the crusher of dreams, and that was that was the vibe and the feeling. Google, amazing organization, lots of friends there. Maybe, I don't know, they might have gotten laid off. Who knows? But it always felt like this is the place where dreams come true, where you can go in as a high creative consciousness, come in, and they're going to be like, "Oh my God, I love you. I love what you're able to do, and we're trying to make the world a more habitable place. Go over there, whatever you need. You know, we'll figure things out, and we'll do it. And we've got incredible scale, right? You know about that. We've got these great, massive, globally networked computers. What do you need to make this happen? Because that's what we were born on. We were born on this vision of a dream of a world where, you know, we indexed all the world's information. Oh my God, I'm swooning. That's amazing. Okay, so you recognize creativity and you recognize imagination, and you have the resources, the structure, the money, the buildings, the chairs, the desks. I need a pencil. You can do all that, and we're going to do this together. And at some point, that is not allowed to happen. And I think it's a systemic issue that any large structure will deal with at some point, especially if it's commercial. They'll be like, at some point, it's just too big. Or at some point, the imagination just gets drained out or discouraged, or like, you know, like with Dennis and you know, especially at the point where like the founders leave and it's like, let's get some adults in the room. I don't want people who are wearing red Converse. I want people who wear a nice Florsheim shoe, a nice English brogue they should be wearing. And they should know how to talk in front of an audience, and they should have tailored suits and this kind of thing. And then you're like, okay, that's the beginning of the end. You'll just be a kind of, you know, this machine just turning things on. And I think we're at that point. So this is a long way of saying, I think we're at that point where now imagination and structure are antagonizing each other. Structure doesn't want to have anything to do with imagination. There's a cartoon version, and that means that there is a possibility of igniting this creative renaissance that I'm talking about, where imagination can see its value and its place and its role in the world.
I have one last question, just because I'm curious, which is, and maybe you're doing this already, I feel like you're making movements at the moment, but like, if there's like a fantasy futury project, well, what would that be for you at this point in your journey?
I don't know well, I guess it's a project in some ways, but it's like, could you imagine a world in which, let's say, Walt Disney was a futures company, where everything about it was trying to find the way to help people to imagine, you know, these other worlds, which I think Disney, at least what I understand of Disney, does a really great job of. We'll take you into a world and we'll wrap you around it, and we'll allow you to experience it with a sense of play and exploration, and, you know, a little bit of moments of those kind of like fear. I'm not going to die, but this is kind of scary. Let's do this. And, you know, all the other kind of tentacles that it kind of reaches out towards. So ways of telling stories about possible worlds that capture the imagination, not just of what commercial futures kind of work does, but kind of across the board that makes the way of imagining into futures like legible. I see it as like, it's like this, I just use the Disney example because I love like Walt Disney's early map of what Disney was. It's just this serpentine kind of beautiful mess. It wasn't like top down. It was all just kind of like, this and this is going to connect to this and this is going to. So I love that image. The other thing that I sort of see in that is, you know, like the modern version, it's something like there are these poles, and the poles connect these different organizations that exist today. I think it's like Apple, Patagonia, and teenage engineering. It's like if you had a bouillabaisse of the sensibilities of those organizations and the value, not just the values, but the financial and industrial might. Because I think if we're gonna make more habitable worlds, we're not going to do it just by saying we're going to do it. It's like, I need Tim Cook and his factories and his operational excellence and his, don't put your design, your remarkable, beautiful, amazing design teams on that thing. We need to be doing this. It's almost like if we're, the stories that you hear, I'm sure it was very complex kind of series of negotiations and all kinds of stuff, but it's like, and who knows what Henry Ford's kind of politics. I mean, we do know what his politics were, but it's like, if we had to go on a war footing suddenly, on a turn of a dime, that thing where it's like, okay, we're going to all rally in this one direction. We're going to focus. Or maybe a better example is like when, Kennedy said, we're going to go to the moon in this decade. Mm-hmm. And all these resources came together to do this remarkable thing. It's like, we're going to spend, however many trillions of dollars in 2024 dollars to hand build a spaceship to get two dudes to walk on the moon. Hand build the thing. This is, we got two of them. And the one up there better work because there's no service center up there. We're not going to send someone up there to tighten a bolt. And wow. And with all the other attendant kind of like social and political conflicts that were going on at the time, Stokely Carmichael saying it's like, Whitey's on the moon. Like, what are they doing for us here? Like all that still we're able to get our shit together to do this. And, so the corollary being like all of a sudden General Motors and Ford or whatever, they stopped making cars and refrigerators and they started making airplanes because we had to. Someone got up and said, look, we got to do this. Fascism isn't cool. We got to do something about this. Otherwise we're putting all these things in jeopardy. And they're complicated and not always fun politics around this, but it got done. We did it. And I think, my personal belief is we were on the right side of history in that one. Same thing with the moon. It's like that shapes so many. It shaped me, it's just like, I can be an astronaut. I want to be an astronaut. Why not? Look at that. Can't be an astronaut, be an engineer. That seems close enough. Right? Yeah.
I thought that we ended up here. I had no idea that we would, but it was wonderful. And you did not disappoint. Julian, thank you so, so much. It's always, always fun chatting with you. And thanks for just sharing your brain with us for a little while.
It was lovely to talk to you as always, Radha. I'm really excited that we're connected this way and that we can work together on, I think, what is a really important ambition and mission and dream to just build more habitable worlds.
Thank you for tuning in to Future Feelings in collaboration with Deem Audio. You can find our other 5 episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google, as well as explore Deem's podcasting program at deemjournal.com/audio. To keep up with my work, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Radha_Mistry.